Hey everybody, today's episode is brought to you by Dzanc Books, publisher of the story collection A Girl Goes Into the Forest by Peg Alford Purcell. It is the official July pick of the Nervous Breakdown Book Club. Purcell's sophomore collection centers on mothers, daughters, and the myth of the American girl. Ramona Otherppl, author of Awayland, calls it, quote, as beautiful and fine as a string of pearls and as complex as a 1,000-piece puzzle. And Kirkus Reviews raves, quote, Purcell is a master of the atmospheric moment. A Girl Goes Into the Forest, the new story collection by Peg Alford Purcell, on sale July 16th from Dzanc Books.
You are not alone. You have found other people.
You and I
Way
have
over
a
there
friend
by
in
the black
common.
hole.
Every stupid thing that a writer could do, I've done.
I think it's really beautiful.
Let's get ready
Dude,
to
what a
mumble.
struggle, you know?
It was
I'm officially
incredible.
ready
It was like your
to
head
American
exploded
actor.
seeing what was
I
really
honestly
there.
am. I'm ready for
And now
American
here's your
actor
host,
to descend.
Brad Listi.
Just one person at just one time.
Hello, everybody. How's it
Right.
going? Welcome to the Otherppl podcast. I'm Brad Listi, and I am here in Los Angeles, California. I'm recording this on July 4th, just so you know. I'm standing here in my garage on July 4th. There was just an earthquake. I believe it registered 6.4 on the Richter scale. I got to be really honest. Just this morning, earlier this morning, I went to the gym, and I was sitting there, and I was listening to a podcast, and the woman that was talking on the podcast, she was being interviewed, she started talking about psychic powers and how she believes that everybody has them, but in certain people they're just more developed. And it got me thinking about the most intense psychic experience of my own particular life, where I was in my office, as I usually am. I was staring at my computer, as I usually am. And it suddenly occurred to me, like the line, this sentence, I smell an earthquake, suddenly occurred to me. And I tweeted it. And not an hour or two later, there was an earthquake in Los Angeles. I don't know how to explain that. Maybe it's just a coincidence, but it was just so strange that I had that thought in the first place, that it struck me so strongly that I tweeted it, and then that an actual earthquake happened an hour or two later. So just this morning, I was thinking about that, and then I came home, and I was sitting at the counter eating breakfast, or having some caffeine, and suddenly my dog Twiggy started growling, and I started to feel the roll. And it's weird, because unless it's really strong and there's just no question at all, you usually spend the first few seconds of an earthquake wondering if you're actually experiencing an earthquake, or, you start to wonder if you're fooling yourself. So I sat there, and then I looked up, and I saw the little chandeliers in our kitchen. We have light fixtures that hang, and they started to sway gently. And I knew, and I heard some creaking beams and wood, all the things that you hear during an earthquake. So that has just happened. And fortunately, everything seems to be fine. At least in my household. So Erin Hosier is my guest today. Her new memoir is called Don't Let Me Down. It is available from Atria Books. And Erin Hosier is my literary agent, and has been for, my God, a long time. 15 years? Something like that. And she has been on this program once before with Patty Schemmel. And you may remember this. It was episode 497. Erin and Patty were here to discuss Patty's memoir, Hit So Hard. And Patty, of course, is a musician and famously was the drummer of the band Hole. And she and Erin collaborated on the book, and they came over and talked to me a while back. And now Erin Hosier has published a memoir all her own. And once again, it's called Don't Let Me Down. It is a wonderfully funny and deeply honest and moving book about her upbringing in Ohio, her family life, and in particular her relationship with her dad, who was a very difficult and troubled and dynamic and interesting person. And there was a lot of love there, but there was a lot of difficulty there, and she goes right into it and captures the complexity of family life that ultimately describes all of us. So, a terrific book, and I had a great time talking with Erin and helping her celebrate the publication of her memoir, and that is coming up momentarily. Before I get there, though, I do have a ton of mail to respond to and listener feedback. A lot of you reached out to me after last week's episode 587, my conversation with Bret Easton Ellis. And, the conversation in large part centered on his new essay collection, White, which has been making a lot of waves and has been generating a big response in the world of book media. So I'm just going to go through and read listener responses. I feel obligated to give everybody I can, or as many of you as I can, a fair hearing here, since you were kind enough to listen and write in. So Jeffrey, a listener named Jeffrey says, "Welp, this wasn't the Bret Easton Ellis political commentary that I wanted, but maybe the 2019 American Wildscape check-in that I needed. Killer episode. It takes a village." Another listener named Felicity said, "This was one of the best conversations, and that's all I'm going to say. Also, I have to go read Bret Easton Ellis's works. I've never done so before." A listener named iGlow says, "That was a really interesting and intelligent interview." A listener named Chelsea says, "Such a great episode." A listener named Lauren says, "The exchange at the 1 hour mark got my nipples hard. Incredible interview." A listener named Adam says, "I admired Brad Listi's restraint in the most recent episode of Otherppl. I wish Bret Easton Ellis would try to be a little more thorough with his argument, because I think there could be more commonality if he went deeper than, quote, calm down and, quote, you're overreacting. Loved the conversation." A listener named Rhea says, "Dear Brad, I think Bret Easton Ellis needs therapy for his anger, and there's little that you or I can do about that. One of the best parts of being 50 plus is realizing that there's little you can do about many things, especially angry men. Regards, Rhea." So just so you know, I'm not 50 plus. I don't know if you were implying that. I'm only 43, and I'm hanging on. A listener named William says, "Dear Brad, you did Yeo Man's work in trying to empathize with and draw out Bret Easton Ellis, which really amounts to attempting to penetrate the calculated ennui and over-it-allness of his shtick. That said, he feels to me like the Trump of literature at this point, a guy who gets attention by putting on display the parts of ourselves that we hate. I don't mind a straightforward Hobbesian argument. The endless war of all on all, the American spirit is a hard stoic killer. But the laziness of his trolling, how wildly uninformed he is, and how epistemologically apathetic he is, yuck. Yes, he gets a reaction from folks. So does a gun or a fart. But I mean to praise you. I thought you did a good job. You're not a confrontational person. You're a curious, supportive, give everybody a chance to say their piece kind of person, which is good. You tried to have a civil and genuine discourse with a fundamentally disingenuous person. You made some important points and highlighted the essential hypocrisy of his whole pose, which has spanned his career. His whole shtick is to pretend not to give a shit and then act all weirded out when other people do. Anyway, to reiterate, you did good. Bret is a well-defended guy, having had years of practice, and you forced him deeper into himself." Signed, Will. And then a listener named John says, "Brad, the attached clip of your Bret Easton Ellis conversation stood out to me. It's when Bret is talking about the types of fiction that he reads and can't read." And so here I'm going to interrupt and I'm going to play the clip in question. So here's the clip that John is referring to.
And it's true. But if I pick up a book and stylistically it grabs me, I'm there easily. It's just finding that is a little harder. And really developing that kind of style is, I think, key to a writer's, existence and keeping them going. A way of seeing the world that you're relating to the reader that no one else can do. That's why I think I get so annoyed by a lot of genre fiction that just is telling a story. Like a lot of mysteries just don't grab me because they're told in such a bare bones fashion. And I'm not interested in the information. I'm not interested in the information at all. I'm interested in how the information is being given to me. And that has pretty much always been the way I've read to a certain degree.
So there you go. So John then continues in his letter, "Because of the political conversations you and Bret fell into prior to this moment of the conversation, I heard this clip with Trump and politics in my head and instantly saw a comparison between Brett's tastes regarding different types of fiction and the tastes of different voters as to the rhetoric of different politicians. Doesn't, quote, I'm not interested in the information. I'm not interested in the information at all. I'm interested in how the information is being given to me, end quote, sound a lot like the fiction a Trump supporter caricature would be prone to read, one where facts are irrelevant, where it's all style and no substance. Doesn't that sound like the fiction that comes out of Trump's mouth? Anyway, I just thought it was an interesting moment, and it obviously got me thinking. Just wondered if you thought anything like this in the moment, after the fact, or are thinking about it now. Not trying to use it to prove that Brett is a closeted Trumper, but he may have stumbled onto a literary to politics analogy for me. That is all. Thanks for recording, John. So thanks for listening, John. That is really interesting. I think Donald Trump is definitely a style over substance politician if there ever was one. And if you really love style, and that's your primary concern in literature or politics or otherwise, then I suppose there might be some appeal there. But I don't know. I did not make that connection in the moment. And frankly, I didn't make the connection until I read your email. But it's an interesting take, and I appreciate the careful listen. So that's all I'm going to get to, just so I don't keep this monologue going on interminably. I do want to say a few words of my own about the Bret Easton Ellis interview because, you know, the reality is he's a major American author and has been for a long time. He's in the literary fiction space. He's had the kind of success that most writers of literary fiction dream of. Not only did he publish, when he was 21, he's sold some books. And, I feel like he's one of those writers that people know. And most people don't know writers. So I did sweat a lot over the interview. I spent a lot of time thinking about it and worrying about it and wanting to get it right, aware of the fact that there's been this big response in book media to White, the essay collection that Brett just published. And I know that there have been some media appearances or interviews that he's done that have made some waves, and there's just been a lot of conversation and controversy and heat around him and this book. Not only, with regard to the recent publication, but in general, and especially in the era of Trump. So I wanted to do a good job in the interview. And, to do a good job, you have to first figure out what that even means. So first I read Brett's book. I read a lot of the reviews. And when I was reading, I worked hard to be open and to not let any reviews or tweets or whatever that I had read infect the read. I wanted to give it a fair hearing. And the truth is that I found many points of agreement in the book. He's a smart guy. And there were moments, like I said in the interview, where I was nodding. I think some of the pieties of the left are, they deserve to be challenged. And I do have some trouble with cancel culture, where I worry about the rules of the game and how that works and who gets to decide and make the rules. But there were other moments where I wasn't nodding. And there were some moments where I was even kind of recoiling, especially when it comes to Trump. And I said all of that in the interview. I tried to be honest about it while also maintaining decorum and being respectful. I think you can do both. And I hope that's what the effect of the interview ultimately was, is that you can have people who don't necessarily agree about everything, especially when it comes to important subject matter, but who can nevertheless have a good conversation and be game and honest with one another and try to share perspectives. And I think that kind of dialogue is in short supply in the country right now and maybe the world in general. And so hopefully it serves some kind of positive purpose, and it was enjoyable to hear that kind of exchange. I'm sure I missed some stuff. I've obviously spent time in the aftermath thinking about it and wondering, I could have done this better, or I could have done that better, or maybe I should have held back here. Maybe that was rude. I was trying to walk the line. And I enjoyed Brett, in person. He came over. He was nice. He was funny. He was open. He was game. He didn't ask for any changes. He didn't ask me to edit anything. He just said, let it roll, let it roll. And he sat here for almost 2 hours. So there's that aspect to things too. I enjoyed meeting him. But, again, I got to be honest, the nonchalance around Trump is really hard for me. And I think if I had something that I would like to do over, I think if there's one thing that's been bothering me most of all, it's that I wish that I would not have failed to ask him about his disinterest in politics and his professed apoliticism. He says he's apolitical over and over again. He's very clear about that. He doesn't like politics. He's apolitical. He doesn't vote. And, on the day of the interview, you have to realize I work a full-time job, and we recorded during the week over my lunch break. So it was a 2-hour window of time that I carved out for this. But I was in the middle of a busy day, and I wonder, if I didn't have all of my brain together. I wonder if I would have been better if I would have had all of my brain. But it is what it is, and that was the time that we found. And I think that, there is a cognitive dissonance, a fundamental cognitive dissonance around being apolitical, not voting, and professing to not care about politics, and to then writing a book that addresses many hot-button political issues of the day and talks at length about the president and people's reaction to the president. So I'm not saying that you can't do that if you're apolitical, or, anybody can do whatever they want. You can write whatever you want. But I think generally, not just with Brett, but in general, like a critique that I have around politics, and I've probably said this before on the show, is that it's this weird area of concern in human life where people who don't care about it, don't really think about it much, don't read deeply about it or watch the news or read the papers or pay careful attention to it, nevertheless have really strong opinions about it and believe that those opinions are right. And if you try to draw a line of comparison, I always use sports. It's like if somebody is like a huge hockey fan and they love hockey and they read the sports page every day and they follow hockey, they know all the players, they know the statistics, they know the teams, they know the coaches, they know the strategy, they know who got drafted where, like all the stuff, all the minutia of sports fandom. You have that person who has a particular opinion about who's going to win the Stanley Cup playoffs. And then you have somebody who doesn't know anything about hockey, never watches hockey, doesn't know the rules of hockey, doesn't know the players' names, knows nothing, can't ice skate, but nevertheless has a very strong opinion about who's going to win the Stanley Cup playoffs. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I know it's not a one-for-one. Politics and hockey are two different things, I think. But it just seems to me that if you don't like hockey and you don't pay attention to hockey, you wouldn't have much to say about hockey. That's the point that I am stuck on, and that's a question that I would like to have posed more clearly. So anyway, I did my best. And, my show is not a takedown show. I'm not interested in that. And I'm not really sure how great I am at confrontation or debate for that matter. I like to meet people where they are. I like to have conversations and let them say their piece. And I like to learn about people and who they are and what makes them tick. And I like to learn about their work and why they do it. All the usual stuff of this podcast. So this particular episode with Brett was loaded to an unusual degree just because of all the media coverage and how much interest there is, in particular in the literary community. Most of the time when I have people on this show, it's like, I'm asking them if they saw God when they took acid or what happened in junior high or, So I hope I did an okay job. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope that hearing us discuss and debate a little bit in a civil manner was a positive thing. And I think it's important to engage with politics in a serious way, especially now. I think part of the reason why we're in the situation that we're in is that people don't enough. There's not enough conversation and deep thought and deep reading happening in that space. And there's not enough attention paid to the fundamentals of civics and governance and citizenship. Like, I know some people, kind of eye roll when I start talking like that, probably, but I think it's important. I think we get the country we deserve in a lot of respects. And the only way that we're going to get a saner country and a saner species is if people participate more and realize their own agency. So enough about that. Thank you guys for listening. Thanks for responding and writing and letting me know what you think. And thanks again to Brad Listi for coming over and talking to me. So my guest today, once again, is Erin Hosier. Her new memoir is called Don't Let Me Down. It is available now from Atria. I had such a good time seeing her when she came through town, and I am so happy for her. And I just really loved her book. I read it in 2 sittings. So here she is, folks. This is Erin Hosier, and her memoir, one more time, is called Don't Let Me Down.
And I somehow didn't think of myself as a writer, so I thought that that would elude me. Like, I could escape the necessary depression that comes with feeling like and the panic, because I would really just panic.
Because it's so
the blank page.
It's so effortless.
What?
On the page, it comes across as you are in control of the material.
Really?
Yes.
Because I never felt in control the whole time that I was writing it, and I also hated it and hated myself for taking it on. And I think several times I was like, I need to give this money back. I need to bow out. And something just wouldn't let me not keep going. And part of it was my agent. And of course, then I was broke after a while. And I was like, I can't pay the money back. I just have to keep forging ahead.
But that can be a good pressure, like whatever it takes,
Yeah. But it felt bad. And I think I lost my confidence. And then I went on a medication that didn't work for me, and that can really fuck up a writer's
like what, like
process.
An SSRI? Or?
Yeah, like something for one's brain, but an antidepressant. And it just took months and months to work, you know what I mean? And I just couldn't get back to myself, where I felt like I'm in control of this narrative.
So what was the turning point? Or did you just like it's nice to think that there was some moment or pivot and suddenly it just came flying out of you. But like most often, for me anyway, it's like then you just start to plot and all of a sudden you look up and there's like 20 pages done, and then you go back into a funk for a week, and then you come back again, and there, was that how it was, or was it a burst?
A couple things happened. One was classic publishing nightmares happened, like one after another, but they kind of were good for me in that they gave me a lot more time. So for instance, I originally sold the book to the Free Press, which is an imprint that is now like a little bit to the right politically, but within the Simon & Schuster family, but that was not what the imprint was at the time. And then for a while, that imprint went under, and I got to keep my editor and my book contract, but they moved it over to another imprint called Atria.
Which is great.
I was lucky there. Then I was a year turning in my draft. I was a year late turning in that draft. Like, I got an extension. And then
Can I ask you a
editor...
question?
Sure.
Just for people listening,
yes.
What happens, and you can speak to this both as an author and as an agent, when an author has a deadline for a book that was sold on proposal and they miss the deadline? Like, is there typically a financial penalty, or is it...
it's not a financial penalty, but contractually they can say, wow, you didn't deliver, so we're going to cancel this.
Oh.
And then they typically will like give you, you know, you've signed the contract and you've collected on a portion of the advance, usually a third or a quarter of the advance, and you'd have to pay that back. So sometimes if they cancel it, they will let you pay them back with proceeds from when you sell it again, presumably if you do. Publishers, from what I've seen, are not typically like, they're not going to sue you.
Right.
I mean, they will maybe eventually, but it just doesn't follow through. So they don't like to do it, but they will get very frustrated and angry.
Yeah.
And they can do it. So, I mean, cancel your book. So it's just a lot of pressure, and like working in the business, like all these people know me. So there's
Right.
that paranoia, like, did they just buy this because I mean, it's awful.
Yeah.
It's awful.
All
like,
the
what
head
goes
games.
into-
Plus, it's like you know everybody.
Right. So then the editor was, when I turned the book in earnest, the first draft anyway, which was like 400 pages, classically overwritten, she wasn't able to devote any time to it, which was essentially like a developmental edit. So again, I was kind of lucky just to get this pass of yet another year goes by. And my agent was like, this is unacceptable.
Who's your agent?
Betsy Lerner
Oh, okay,
is my
yeah.
agent and also my friend and boss. But that's another story. But I was relieved to have the extra time to just to make it better, but also just to feel better and stronger about myself as a person. So the way I finally got the main draft down was, I think, in 2013 when I moved home to Ohio into my mom's house for 6 months and worked remotely there, which anyone can do when you work in publishing, but not for a house. That I could, first of all, interview her and get her blessing and her eye on some of my pages, which is probably unusual for a memoir writer who's exposing a lot of family secrets. But she was very generous with me in like giving me permission, validating my memories, thinking of things I hadn't thought, and then also providing a lot of backstory for things that I couldn't have known as a child.
You have great, like, unbelievable memory.
I have
of
an
this.
unbelievable memory. I mean, I just do. For things in the past, like I can't remember people's names or faces in a way, unless they're like on a movie screen.
Right.
But I think like either I'm so sensitive, I think I'm just really sensitive. So like when anything, you know, traumatic certainly, but also just that left an impression on what I now know is like my writer's mind,
Mm-hmm.
like that eye that you have for sense memory. I just remember like thoughts I had when I was in 11th grade, and I remember where I was when I had those thoughts.
I don't remember a fucking thing.
I
it
know
seems
you
like.
told me that, and it's. I think it just you
It's
had
not
a happy.
it's not entirely true.
It isn't entirely true because attention deficit disorder is so vivid, and I know based on real events,
Yeah.
right?
So the sticky stuff sticks.
Yeah.
But I feel like there are some people who do have like extraordinary recall for really specific things, like thoughts they had in their youth, outfits they wore on a certain day. You know,
Totally.
I don't have that level of detail usually.
That's interesting. Huh.
But
Do you think that's why you're drawn to fiction?
I don't know. I wonder sometimes if I like blew a fuse, I smoked too much pot or something.
Well, I definitely smoke too much pot still.
Right.
But it's true. It's like I have a hard time making things up, like plotting. That is, or building a world. Like that's something where I feel like I'm not creative. It's just the recall.
I can tell you this. When I was reading your book, there's so much of it I didn't know. Like, I've known you for years and years, but I didn't know the story.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting to like know the person, but not know this part of their lives.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of it. But we met as adults.
Yes. I think in 2005.
That's about right.
Right.
Yeah. So it was super fun and like kind of voyeuristic, and it was also very much your voice.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it was really like, oh my God, this is like, all of Erin's humor is there, and as heavy as certain parts of it can be, it was a joy to read.
Oh, good.
I blew through it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
surprising.
I want to talk to you about the conception of the book. You mentioned the original subtitle earlier. What is it?
Yeah, A Father and Daughter and 27 Beatles songs.
And you must have come up with that in the proposal.
I knew it was going to be a father-centric story. Like, I think that in my life at the time, I think I was like 34, and I had just gotten out of this horrible breakup with a probable sociopath. Or that's just my opinion. You can call it fake news. But I had been having all these like heavy conversations with other friends of mine that were single, not just heterosexual people, but the way that women were relating to men if they were heterosexual. And I believe in the collective unconscious, and I was getting a lot of therapy and looking at societal trends, and Mad Men was very much a thing, and I was obsessed with Sally Draper and the way that she had, Don's number. Like, she was the one that saw everything really clearly, and and coupled with the fact that I did have this enormous amount of confidence around being able to sell or write, moreover, a book proposal for a biography or a memoir, since that's my specialty as an agent. And even though I didn't sell it, I certainly knew, every editor that read it and all that stuff. Like, you know how
to do it. You know what works.
Yeah.
You see, over time, you see what works.
Yes. And certainly back then, memoir now is really difficult to sell if you're not famous, or like the story isn't just extraordinary. Yeah.
So what is it that goes into a book proposal that like gives it a better than average chance?
I think people responded to, I had the title, I had the epigraph, which was Chris Farley on Saturday Night Live interviewing Paul McCartney, the real Paul McCartney. I had that epigraph in my mind, and I had the Don't Let Me Down title, which I was like, that says it all to me about the parent-child bond. And I knew it was going to have that Beatles structure. It's another running theme in my life, and it was certainly like rock and roll history. It's what I represent, a lot of rock and roll biographies or biographers.
And you and your dad had a special bond over the Beatles.
Yes.
Like, he introduced you to the band. That was the music of your youth.
That was our hobby. Like how every kid, hopefully if they have a dad, like has that thing. Like with my brothers, it was like the golf course. But I've never been on a golf course like on purpose. But we would play records, and I would go deep, and I would try to understand who he was and why he was like that, and in fact why men are like they are the way they are.
Well, no, okay, so let's pause
through
for
the
a moment.
lives of the Beatles in a way, or through the music and the lyrics of those four glorious,
lads from Liverpool.
Yeah.
Well, and your dad is an extraordinary character, like from a literary perspective.
Yes. Yes.
Like, he contains a lot, there are like, and it's funny that we're talking about this because literally about an hour before, not even an hour before you came over, my daughter came in here and she was like, Dad, she's like, I think there's like 3 of you. There's you who talks like this, and she did this impression of me when I'm like distracted and she's asking me questions and I'm like doing the dishes or, you know, doing a million different things. And she's like, that's you when you're like not paying attention.
Yeah.
And she's like, then there's you who's like normal. And then there's you who's like, Evan, you know, and she did this impression of me.
Amazing.
And I'm like, I looked at her and I was like, you're right. I was like, I'm sorry. I'm doing the best I can. But like,
they see everything.
They see everything. And she holds my feet to the fire. And I mean, it's good for me, but it's also, it's painful. You're just like, oh God, you know, I can't hide.
It's true. It's true. It must feel, I think I've never wanted to have children, or I've never had that instinct for myself, because I think that I was so freaked out by being a kid through the eyes of my parents, and how freaked out I could tell they were to be in control.
Right.
And because they weren't in control. So, and you know, for people that don't know about any of the plot points of the book or about my dad, he had an incredible, uncontrollable temper that would manifest physically with the kids in particular. Like, he just, when he lost his temper, he would hit a kid. And so that kind of hypervigilance, I feel like I intuited a kind of like, if you can have this effect as a child on a parent to the extent that they lose their mind enough to hit you, and they're so big and you're so small, like, what is that? That must be like the worst life, to be a parent. And I think that kind of blessed me in a way with like, I didn't need to be a mother, which is a whole other, you know, pressure that's put on women. And so I just, going back to what you're saying about your daughter, like, I did see everything, and I remember, you know, seeing him lose control and what that looked like. And it looked like fear, it mostly looked like fear and like regret, even before regret could be expressed, like, which I also saw in the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. Like,
really?
I thought when he came out at 11, you know, like Matt Damon said in Saturday Night Live, I'm going to start at 11.
Right.
And his eyes were kind of like bloodshot, like he was on the verge of tears the whole time. And his jaw was set in a certain way, like very tight, like his, it's hard to explain, but Trump also has a certain jaw thing, and my dad totally had it.
Really?
And none of those men look alike in the face, but when I see a middle-aged man like lose his temper, it always looks the same. And I feel like Brett Kavanaugh, like my dad, just like couldn't be honest. He just cannot like look himself in the face, but he knows. And I think that's what's interesting about it, is like, why is it so hard to say sorry to anyone, but especially your kid?
It looks so sorries didn't happen. Yeah, sorries didn't happen easily.
Not easily. Like, certainly not like, sorry for calling you a whore. And maybe they did happen, but it was like in other ways. I don't know if it was explicitly sorry, but just like being really super nice, or just being like extra loving, or saying I love you, which is different than saying I'm sorry and I love you.
Yeah. But it's like hopefully implicit or something.
It's implicit. And I did feel, you know, loved by him, which is part of what makes me so sad and made me so sad when he died, because I was like right at that Saturn returns age, if you believe in that stuff.
What does that even mean?
I don't know. It's like a fork in the road in astrology.
Oh, okay.
Apparently, like every 27 years, which of course is when a lot of rock stars die. the 27 Club, you're supposed to come to this fork in the road in your life where you could it's either like a breakup or a death or like a total career change or a nervous breakdown.
Great.
And so it's symbolic in that way, I guess.
Well, but
I'm
I like the way...
losing my train of thought.
No, but I like the way you portray like the complexity of him and your mom, like pretty much, and yourself. Like the thing about it is that people are messy, all of us.
Totally messy.
And it's like he's not, and like there are moments where I'm like, I can't believe he just did that. And then there are moments where I'm like, oh, you know, like, and I feel for him. Like not only am I like relating as a dad who loves his daughter, but I'm also like sympathetic to somebody who, you know, you screw up and then you feel bad and you're trying to make it right. And and I think
a tragic hero in a way.
Yeah.
Like one of the things I've learned in the aftermath of publishing a memoir, because of course it's in the back of your mind all the time what his family is going to think, because he has surviving, you know, brothers and stuff like that. And everyone has been enormously supportive, but I've heard through the family grapevine that his brothers were really shocked to hear that he was afraid of their father. Because there's a scene in the book where I think it's sort of the essential trauma in his life, which is that he lost his mother very suddenly in the 60s, right when he had gone off to college. And it was of cancer. But back then, I guess they didn't talk about cancer, and they didn't like let children into a cancer ward, or maybe anyone.
What did they
so
tell them?
Mysterious. They thought she had the flu. Like my dad got a call at Ohio State from his younger brother, and he was like, "Come home quick, mom's in the hospital. She's not doing well." And he didn't even know what it was. It turned out to be like uterine cancer, which nobody, you know, talked about or even knew about. It was like female trouble. But so my dad was like, he had super long hair, and he was a hippie, and he rushed to the hospital, but got there with long hair. And his father, who had been, you know, the greatest generation. He wasn't in the military, but he was a pilot, and he just had that kind of father knows best kind of, in my mind, from what I knew of him, very quiet man. You know, he was like, "What are you doing here looking like a hippie? Go get your hair cut." And she died while he was at the barber, like shaving his head so he could look presentable. And I think that's where his fear of his father came from. But I'd heard stories from my step-grandmother that he used to be, that he feared his dad. And because he had a terrible temper, and when his dad would get wind of it, then his father, I assumed, disciplined him or got violent with him. But apparently, according to my uncles, never hit them, never had so much as a spanking, unless it was like to prevent somebody from, you know, playing with guns or something. And so it's either unreliable narrator, or it's every kid has a different relationship with their parent, like if there's siblings, or, you know, it was just the sense that I got.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that person, my grandfather is deceased now, and I only knew him to be a very gentle and kind person, but very like closed off in the way that many in that generation are. But that's the toughest. Like, I think that made them sad, and then that makes me sad, you know, but not sad enough that I regret it.
Yeah, well, you know, you have a right to tell your story. You're his daughter, and I don't know. I feel like we have to have the right and the authority to tell the story of our lives, and if that involves family, like
if you don't, I shouldn't have been brought into the world if they didn't want me to write a memoir about it.
Right.
I mean, you just have to parent as if all your kids are going to grow up to write a book about it.
That's exactly right. I got to watch myself. But, I think too about parents, like one of the things that I often notice in myself when I lose my temper with my kids is that it's usually not the thing that they're doing that pisses me off. It's that I've got other, like, work stuff is stressing me out.
Of course.
There's all this other stuff going on. And then God knows there could be psychic baggage from years gone by that is,
Yeah.
for some reason, messing with me or something. So it's always complicated why people lose their shit. It's not because you spilled your milk at the dinner table. It's because there's this accrual of frustrations at work or in life or the marriage or the relationship with your mother or what, you know what I'm saying? Like, I
think that's what saved me as a kid was knowing that it wasn't personal, which is such a weird thing, but I knew it wasn't personal. Like, I saw him flailing. I knew that I was more mature and had more control over myself than he did. Which I think a lot of kids do who grow up in that kind of environment, which isn't very extreme. It was just his discipline was backed up by this evangelical church that we happen to be involved in, which is another part of the book. Coming to terms with a patriarchal God, seeing what that relationship dynamic did to my mother, who was, fairly uneducated and, married and a mother of 3 by, 25 or whatever it was in the 70s,
Yeah.
Very different time. But yes, I can't believe... Recently, I've been rewatching Friday Night Lights, which is one of my favorite shows of all time.
What's his name? Riggins?
Tim Riggins.
Oh
my God.
Every
he
girl
cut
I
his
know.
hair in real life, and I'm just like, it's not the same. Riggins forever. But there's a great scene, I think in season 2, where Tammy Taylor, the mom, played by Connie Britton, has a fight with her daughter that gets physical, and I think she slaps her daughter, and it's something that, and then breaks down afterwards with her husband, Coach Eric Taylor. And that really resonated with me because my mom also hit me once in anger, but it was like, it wasn't anger. It was like, frustration.
Just like...
And of course it's so frustrating.
It's hard to be a parent.
Yeah.
I mean, there are certain moments where you're just like, oh my God, this chaos has got to stop.
And they're like an extension of you too. I mean, family is so intimate. It's so weird how you're like locked in with these people.
That's right.
Especially as a kid. Like, you have no rights, no control.
Yeah.
And you're like forced to love your siblings and parents. and when you're a teenager, like, that's usually really hard when you're forced.
I don't know. I hope it's not as bad as it sometimes is.
I can tell I feel like our generation is doing such a better job, right?
I think I just was saying this the other day or on a recent episode where I was like, quoting a friend's mom who has this theory that everybody parents like 3% better than their parents.
Oh, I like that.
But like, if you come from like a really bad situation, like really, really bad, then there's a chance that you could make a greater percentage jump.
For sure.
But the typical evolution is like, you're like 3% better, which is not nothing,
Yeah.
And then like your kids will hopefully be 3% better, and then we'll evolve as a species.
Well, pop culture is getting better, and I think it's a reflection of culture, but it also helps, train people to be better.
Yeah.
I mean, lately, and to think a little more broadly.
It's amazing how much things have changed since we were little. Like, a lot's changed in our lifetime.
Did you ever think like gay marriage would be ever legal.
Yeah, I didn't even like know an out gay person except for one guy in my high school until I was like almost out of college. Like even in college, I didn't know many in Colorado.
I went to the gay march on Washington in like 1993 in high school because I was like, I'm a riot girl, I'm an activist. And it seemed like, I mean, that whole, what is that church? The one in Kansas. The God kills fags or whatever. That sentiment was so strong that it just felt like it's never going to be accepted. It's so shocking. I think part of it has to do with like how far we've come with HIV and AIDS. But when we were growing up, AIDS definitely defined our understanding.
Right.
And the country was so divided. It was like, remember Oprah, like the shows about like people licking the fruit at the grocery store and these homosexuals are taking over.
Wait, people were licking fruit?
There was this famous Oprah Winfrey episode where there was an urban legend rumor that this HIV positive man, like the only gay in the village, I'm using quotes here because that's a sketch. Anyway, apparently he was licking fruit at the grocery store as a way to infect the masses.
Oh my God.
And she had a special like town hall episode and people were like, divided in the audience, like 70%, 30%. This guy, should be shunned in society for being sick. And of course, he was not licking fruit. It was just, remember when the little kid who got it from the dentist, Ryan White?
He's from Indiana.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. People shunned that kid.
Right.
I mean, I don't know.
There was a lot of fear.
So
I think like we've come a long way with HIV, but I think the driver, and I could be wrong, but I feel like at least one of the principal drivers of the incredible change that's happened, not that it's perfect now, but it's a lot better than it was with like LGBT rights, is culture. I think, the Ellen, like the Ellen show, popular culture. And,
music,
and people coming out. And when people come out and all of a sudden it's like, well, my uncle or, my, one of my friends at school.
Yeah.
Suddenly you start to realize that like, this is our lives. And we,
I think people, a certain percentage of people are gay.
And
have always been through time.
Yeah. So it's like, it's encouraging. I think it's worth studying, in terms of like coming up with strategies for how to advance other social, like righteous social causes. Like, I don't know if there's ever going to be a 1-for-1, but hopefully there are some good lessons to learn.
Well, yeah, I mean, Black Lives Matter, Me Too, these movements that have apparently come with not just the internet, but specifically Twitter, where you can instantly broadcast any secret you may be harboring, which is why I'm not on Twitter. That's a terrifying.
You would be good on it.
Everyone says that, but I can't. I have too much anxiety about what I might say.
Right.
If I always worry that my jokes are just recycled and I don't know how to cite them like I would. You know what I mean? Like I sometimes Google funny things I think to see if
there's precedent.
Yes, because I don't want to be, flamed for taking credit. Who can take credit for being funny anymore?
Well, and not only that, but like you could be
organically.
What if your sense of humor, it gets really dicey around humor. Like if you tell a joke that's like off color, the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Some people might think it's fine. Other people might be like horribly offended. And
my sense of humor is so much darker than is in the book. I mean, because you just can't inflict that on people.
Right.
But those are, you drift to the people that share your sensibility. So thank God for that.
Yeah, right.
But
so we all need like safe space to just like be able to have a sense of humor.
Yeah. And, or tell rape jokes.
Yeah. I mean,
like sometimes it's refreshing. to laugh at it.
You said that in the book, though, right? There's a line about, I think, rape jokes.
I think I was talking about like the third wave feminists, because I worked at Ms. Magazine, and its last incarnation, when it was still like independent and Gloria Steinem was, still coming to the board meetings, and it was New York based. I just lost my train of thought.
No,
right
but like
here.
we were like the rape jokes.
Sorry, yes. I was just saying that, that was the early aughts was when, I don't know, just rape jokes, fuck me feminism, sex work, STI positive, abortion on demand and without apology. It was kind of just like we will talk about whatever the fuck we will talk about. I feel like now it's a lot less. Like, you can talk about what you want to talk about, but not
on Twitter.
Not on fucking Twitter.
Well, and we should say too, and this brings us back to your book, is that you're you're saying this, and you have this kind of dark sense of humor, and are kind of willing to go there in humor. But you're also somebody who's a survivor of abuse, which you detail in the book.
Yes.
So it's not like you don't have any, there's no understanding. Like, you went through this.
Yeah. Or just everybody. I mean, it just, not everybody, but it feels like most women and men at least know somebody who can, vouch for this experience, whatever the experience is. And whether I've experienced it or not as an ally or a human being, I just feel like that it's important to talk about things in their raw state.
Well, I'll tell you, it's that kind of stuff. I feel like I was a little bit naive. I was a little bit naive about a lot of things, just because I had this like sort of apple pie Midwestern upbringing. And you sort of...
And Roxanne Gay still likes you.
Yeah, right,
so it's okay.
You get exposed to a lot of things, and, or you get exposed to more things over the years. You meet more people, and you start to realize how pervasive sexual abuse is.
Oh.
It's like, my God, this is happening all over. It makes me terrified as a dad.
It's insidious, but it's good to be terrified as a parent, because you'll talk about it and create a safe space and all of that. But even just that you're aware of it, and that you're a father who's going to do right by their kid and not abuse them, number one.
Right.
Because that's part of the problem. My book isn't about being sexually abused by a family member, thank God. But that is a lot of people's experiences.
And, so for people listening, it was like a boy in the neighborhood.
It was, the neighbor, who was also our babysitter. He was like a juvenile, but who grew to be a violent rapist while he was living next door to us, and didn't discriminate between boys or girls or ages, apparently.
Why? Like, what was he abused? Like, I know that.
It's a hard question. Maybe, but maybe not, because he could have been, a psychopath.
Just like a chip missing.
Absolutely, and that happens. I mean, how could a parent, have sex with, rape a child? Like, these things happen. How could anyone rape a child?
Right.
Or anyone? How could you hold someone down? Or look and it's
unthinkable.
It's unthinkable.
And yet there's people like I guess it's the mystery of how these people form. Like, is it genetic? Is it environmental? I guess it's some combination of both, maybe.
Yeah, yes. I think it's genetic and environmental, and I think there's a hereditary component. There's a lot. We've talked about this brain stuff a lot, but there's a lot to, a lot of science to support that trauma actually changes our DNA and embeds itself and will be carried on from generation to generation.
And we all, because this gets to something that I wanted to ask you about, because, you know, your father, the relationship that you had with him, certain events from childhood, and then culminating with him passing away, like that's like at least a defining trauma in your life. And I was thinking, like, I guess if you live long enough, eventually there's going to be a defining trauma.
Yes.
Or more, or one or more.
Probably more. I like to think of it as like at least one a decade. You know, like when we were kids, it was like 5 things at once, because my dad had cancer in his late 30s. We thought he was going to die. There was a lot more fear than I have in there about like my father's time out of work, or I mean, there were it was the 80s, and there were a lot of like layoffs all the time, and it was about the primary breadwinner, and so that there were just a lot of things, and plus sexual abuse and walking on eggshells and undiagnosed mental illnesses all over the place, a lack of resources in terms of behavioral health, let's call it, mental health.
Yeah,
even though we had means, you know,
which is still a problem.
Middle class, still a problem.
Like, who gets mental health care? I mean, you got to be privileged. You got to have money.
So much money,
and like to deal with insurance is a big pain in the ass. Most of the good therapists don't even take insurance, right? It seems like
it's such a problem.
Yeah,
it's such a problem. I could write a whole book about it. About trying to find healthcare, a good therapist, anyone to listen to you.
The volume of people who probably need therapy or would benefit greatly from it has got to be so enormous compared to the number of people who actually get therapy. Like,
oh my God. I mean, well, anyone could absolutely benefit from it at certain times in their life. I'm not like a person that's like, psychoanalysis, you should go twice a week.
Yeah,
I mean, unless you're in a crisis, then it's absolutely a good idea if you can afford it. But the traumatized are the children. Not that adults aren't traumatized, but if you don't get that intervention when you are young, like somebody who says to you, looks you in the eye and says, this is not your fault. I see you and what you're going through, and we're going to help you get through this really tough time. And you don't have to let these life events define you.
Right.
Because of the majority, millions and millions and millions of kids are molested or raped every year in America. And only a tiny, tiny percentage will go on to, you know, hurt other people that we know of in this way. So I think the correlation is really fucked up. And I've tried to study it because I'm very interested as well. But I think that's a big fear that people have, and maybe the reason why we don't talk about it at all is one, acknowledging that it happens in families, and it happens, and that we judge the victims, you know.
Well, there's a lot of shame. You write.
There's so much shame.
Yeah, like, but that always has struck me as weird. Like, something like that happened, I feel like I would be like immediately. I like to think for some reason I would immediately be like, oh my God, this just happened to me. But like, almost no one does that. Almost everybody has some feelings of shame that they let it happen. I didn't have shame in the moment. I think I had shame a lot later. Because the shame for me was not protecting my brother. Because so like my experience happened first. And he was our babysitter. And I was 11. And so it was like, I was just at that age where I was like, I'm pretty, I think I got it, you know, like I started to have crushes on boys and girls, but it was like,
I thought I was irresistible, and this is how boys are. You know, he was like 17 or 16 to my 11, but,
Right.
you know, shit happens.
Yeah.
And I think I was ashamed in that way where you just like don't want to have a secret, but really I just wanted to protect my mother primarily.
Protect her
from
from
crying,
Right.
you know, just from like getting upset, because she was a very, she was really hard on herself as a mother. Like if we weren't all sitting down at the table at like 7:00 or 6:30 as a family, you know, she would cry. I mean, she was so upset because her world was falling apart, because she couldn't, you know, be happy within the family and all of that stuff.
That's a lot of pressure.
It's so much pressure.
3 kids at
all
the dinner
this
table? Forget it.
psychodynamics, and they're all fighting, and then she's like, why don't we get along? I mean, it's comedy gold, like when you're growing up.
Right.
But no, I think the shame comes later, and it's I think for me, it's like, have you ever had any like bad sex or pain with sex, or can't get out of a bad headspace during sex, which I think is probably common for all people? I think that's where the shame comes from, because I would sometimes link it to, why can't I stop, you know, why can't I enjoy sex more? When it really could have just been like, I don't know, for the millions of other reasons you don't enjoy sex more. But I would get it in my head like, oh, I'm damaged. There's something wrong with me. I went through like 10 years of dating. And so, you know, serial monogamy, but sometimes like one night stands in New York. So I would like beat myself up over that. Like, oh, I have this hypersexuality because, you know, I'm broken inside.
Right.
So I think
These stories we
that's
tell.
part of the shame, is that it is linked to your sexuality. You know, somebody like literally mind fucks you. Like that's what rape is. It's you're going to feel this for the rest of your life. So many men, I see it, and I'm saying men because these are the lawmakers, and these are they think that you can just forget it. Like you can just, it's one experience, or it was a bad sex, so maybe your vagina was sore. Like they always think in terms of like, well, did she have a black eye? You know, it's violent no matter what, but it does the most harm to your brain.
Wow. You went through a lot. I didn't realize it all. I mean, I think bits and pieces over the years, you would tell me, but like I never got the full puzzle, you know, which the book presents. And I feel like, you know, the therapy that you've done had to have been crucial. Like you have to at some point get help to sort these things out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's too big of I mean, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody could do it alone. Maybe you have a friend or a family member who's particularly gifted at helping emotionally, but at some point, I think like going to therapy has got to have been. It's got to be like a must.
I really wish that I could have saved that money. Like I wish it feels really expensive, and it is. But when you take into account all of the things that we do to make ourselves feel better, or to black out some kind of psychic pain, like substance abuse, which I loved, you know, and I still, you know, have a fondness. Like I get it.
Yeah.
I'm never going to judge people for picking up that whatever it is,
Right.
because I know what it's there for, but it's just not the way, because it will fuck you up. Like that's having a fun, I thought, few-year ride with like opioids. Wow, that really fucks up your SSRI
Yeah.
experience.
You're lucky to
And
be here.
I'm lucky to be here, and it, but that's part of it is also meds for me, you know, and knowing that and not being ashamed of it. And that's another part of like what we have to do as a culture to remove the stigma around just basic anxiety, trauma, you know, the PTSD is real.
Yeah.
So many, I can't believe what people go through.
Well, I'm just saying, like, it just makes me think, like, when there's this many people who are abusing painkillers.
Exactly.
It means people are in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And we need to make some structural, political, and societal changes so that people have access to different and healthier means of dealing with pain. Right? I mean, it's just like, it just seems like if millions and millions of people are all popping opioids, like, yes, they're highly addictive, but it's like a blinking red sign that, like, people are hurting. We gotta reassess, you know?
It's true. And there's not enough options. You know, like a lot of people just go to AA or some kind of 12-step program because it's free, and I don't blame them. But that's what they're looking for, like just the basics of the basic psychodynamic, like having a conversation, have somebody validate your experience.
That's what church should be.
And I hear that it is for some people, but
what service?
It's an institution that has a bottom line.
Well, yeah, and right. And my experience of church growing up, you know, in Catholicism, it wasn't like this open venue for people to share their suffering. It was like there's a man in a robe telling you what God thinks, and that's an oversimplification, but
that's what eventually drove my parents away, was that there was, you know, they gave everything to this church, like all of their free time, their energy, and I'm sure a lot of their money. Like people tithe, right? Like 10% of their income. And when my dad was diagnosed with cancer, or when there were like problems in the relationship, just the church disappeared. There would be like my mom's one best friend who, you know, hung in there with her once she chose like a secular path, if you will. But yeah, it just wasn't there. Like it's the prayer group thing.
Yeah. It's a lot.
I think it's just a quest for community and friendship, and I get it.
Yeah, I totally get it.
I totally get it. I mean, I love a casserole and a potluck and a coffee brunch and community, I guess.
We need, I think we need more of it. I think we need more like social connectivity, and we need to support one another more. And we need like structures that allow for that. You know, like I guess in my idealist's mind, I kind of want for churches to just like rethink the dogma part.
Yeah.
And then get into it, like creating spaces for people to just come in, and like an AA meeting, like there's something so beautiful about a person just getting up in front of a group and just being like, this is how I fucked up. This is where I'm hurting.
Testimony,
just like so raw. And I mean, did they do that at your church?
They absolutely did that. And I appreciate people's testimonies. The problem is then it evolves into this kind of script, you know, where you're washed in the blood of the Lamb, and you're talking, you're not speaking in tongues, but you're speaking in Shakespeare. You know, it's just like you memorized that shit.
But see, at AA, you just say it, and then like at the end, you're like, I'm an alcoholic, and everyone says what? Doesn't everyone say something back? I forget what it is.
Well, they just say your name, like, hi.
Yeah, but nobody's like,
hi.
Nobody is prescriptive afterwards.
No, and you're not allowed to like, you know, give any advice for one, which is good.
Yeah,
you know,
that's what I mean.
You're not supposed to.
So people can just like get up and like, I think even that alone, what people have to hear.
Yeah, it's why we read and write memoir in particular, I think, is to like dwell on a subject, meditate on it, hate read it to see what happens. But it's a good therapy, you know. There's catharsis to be had for the reader, I think, as well.
So did you get it as a writer?
I definitely would have said no. But now that I'm on the other side of the publishing process, yes. In terms of like, it's behind me. My self-loathing is behind me. And I have this, you know, bright future because I just got married.
Okay, so I have a question about this. I was going to save this for the end because I was reading the book, and forgive me if I'm not like we were talking about my memory earlier.
Oh, yeah.
And I read every word, but I don't always retain everything. But there was a guy in high school named Chris.
Yes, I named him Chris.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I named him Chris.
Oh, okay.
I changed most names in the book.
Oh, because then at the end I read the acknowledgments, and you were like, and Chris, you know, you were dedicating it to clearly your significant other who's now your husband.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my God, did she get back together? Like I was...
No, I know. And similarly, my cousin was like, I thought for, you know, 30 pages that you had a secret brother named Simon, and nobody ever told me because I'm the youngest. It was so cute. Yeah, I changed the names, but that person, whose name is Alan, is still a great human being. And so I look at my life as like bookended by these incredible loves. And yeah, so the one I married is named Chris.
How long have you been married? When did this happen?
It happened, we eloped at like in a seaside cottage last November.
Good for you.
Like after my birthday. Oh, it was amazing. I highly, highly recommend like destination elopement.
Well, that's what we did.
You did, right?
Yeah, we went to Italy.
Oh,
yeah.
It's so good.
And like at the time I was like, are we doing this right? And then afterwards I was like, that was exactly right.
Because it's the vacation and you do exactly what you want to do.
And like there's no like the stress of like picking out the silverware. Like fuck that. I just wanted to get married.
No registry, none of that. But I realized after I'd finished writing the book though, because of course it takes another year or sometimes two for it to actually come out because of the production process. So I met him on OkCupid.
Look at you.
4 months before I turned 40. So that was 4.5 years ago, that we started dating. But I wanted to have somebody to kiss at my 40th birthday party. And so I sort of picked him out of the 95th percentile, and we lived 6 blocks away from each other. It was your typical, like, meet cute after that.
Right.
We've been together ever since, and it feels like that first love I had with that original Chris.
That guy, I was like, wow, I don't think I can ever compare. The tattoo
he's
with the
married.
knife.
So I know.
But like as written on the page, I was like, well, this guy is.
He was
I want to run away with him.
He really saved me, and of course I, treated him terribly because I was a dummy and I was, in my 20s. But I'm so grateful that I had that because men are great, can be wonderful human beings, and I think I didn't know that and for a very long time.
Yeah.
And like really believe in it. And now I know it's simply a shitty excuse to be a man and the whole boys will be boys, because you don't have to be like that. It's not your
the whole toxic
destiny.
masculinity thing.
I know, and I get it. People hate these catchphrases, but I don't know. Terry Crews can say it. Didn't he write a book about it?
Yeah, no, and there's another one that just came out by a guy who'd been on the show. His name is Jared Yates Sexton. But I think it depends who raises you, what the culture's like, what your influences are. Some people can coach themselves out of it, or they get a lifeline through books or, whatever it is. But typically there's adults in their lives who are modeling behavior that they emulate. But yeah, it's nice to hear somebody say that, like, it is possible for men to be good people.
It's more than possible.
It can be done. I want to get a little bit further into catharsis. You know, it's a tired question when it comes to memoir, but I think there's validity to it. Like, some people push back and they're like, oh, please, like, don't tell me that you had catharsis from writing a memoir. But I think, like, in a very simple way, when you're dealing with trauma and you're processing it in literature and you go through the grind of writing it.
Yeah.
Like, that act alone of externalizing it.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't make it all better, like, tied up in a neat bow, but it does have a healing power.
Every single person in my life, like, woman that I was close to, said, including my mother, like, once you finish this, and definitely my therapist, once you finish this and really, really finish it, you will find that person. And I hate that kind of shit because you never, I don't know. I just, that kind of like, but it was true. It's exactly
true.
what happened.
Yeah.
Like, I conjured it. I manifested it.
But you also,
or I just learned to not take any more shit. And, I stopped apologizing, or trying to be, like, really nice. And then he just turned out to be, like, the kindest. Like, I picked Chris because he has, like, I just picked his picture because I could tell he had these really kind eyes. And maybe that's just something that I've developed over the years, or maybe there's some women that can just tell, like, or some people where the person's eyes, there's a kind of genuine something. But that's definitely new because I'd always gone for, like, wild eyes and, like, drunken eyes or pinpricks for pupils.
Dilated pupils.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. And I think, too, it's like not only are you conjuring and manifesting, but there's also this, like, unburdening. Like, when you're not carrying that weight, or at least as much of it as you once were.
Yeah.
You know, you have more energy and psychic space to entertain other possibilities or something.
I think that's right. And I feel healthier. Like my body feels healthier. Like, I don't need a massage just for, like, writing.
Right.
Like writing a paragraph or whatever.
or
a good cry. I can cry about other people's shit, And
yeah.
I love crying at other people's shit, but I just feel better. I'm glad. I'm glad it's over. And
Yeah.
I also feel left with an incredible love for my dad, and just, like, ironically, all the happy memories. And you know how, like, when someone dies and all you can feel are just someone you love dies.
Right.
All you remember are, like, the most incredible, like, the best parts of them and, like, the best days, right? And then it's later when the stuff starts coming up, maybe.
It's a process.
It's part of the grief. But now I feel back in a place of grief where it's just, like, a sentimental, like a good sentimental, like a Beatles song.
Well, and they say that you get there. I mean, as time, it's a little cliche, but, like, time heals. And I think if you have, like, a really deep love for somebody, even if it's complicated, there's obviously going to be deep grief. There's going to be these ups and downs in the process, but eventually you get to the point where most of the time the memory doesn't make you cry. It makes you kind of smile.
Yeah.
Like
I'm shocked that I haven't, like, broken down or choked up during any of, my many appearances for this promotional tour. But yeah, I'm glad. It just feels good. And I know, certain people have been like, your dad would be so proud of you.
He would.
Even though.
Right.
And I think that's true. I know that's true.
I feel like, because it's like, how can you say definitively, but you talked earlier about your dad knowing that he was at fault, but not being able to, like, access it.
Yeah.
In a way, by exposing the truth as you remember it.
Yeah.
And by trying to be real on the page, you're sort of doing that.
humanizing
it and like making it external. Like this is the way that, and speaking the truth.
Yes.
And like, I think that there's something on a cosmic level, like healing for him in that.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Yeah. Interesting that you say cosmic. I hope so. I mean, I have 2 siblings, 2 brothers, and we're all like of that age, definitely middle-aged adults. And I'm about to have my first nephew. He's due in like 3 weeks.
Congrats.
And his name is Jackson, after, our dad. So that's interesting. I've been surprised and heartened by the support that my brothers have given me in this endeavor. Like, I'm just shocked that they've read the book and told other people about it.
Were they on board with everything? Like in terms of your depictions, like were the memories line up?
The Greg brother has chosen not to.
The Greg brother?
Read the Greg in the book. My brother, who's not really named that.
Oh, right. Okay.
He's not going to read the book just because it's a little traumatic for him. But Simon has been a huge supporter and has, bought copies. And it's just all very... Yes, everybody... I guess... Well, to answer your second question, I heard a lot of stories that even I'd forgotten about, or that I didn't know of, about like my dad and his anger. Like, for instance, this is a good one. My brother reminded me that I was like 12 or something, and what's it called? George Michael's. Is it George Michael? Yeah.
Faith.
Faith.
Yeah.
Faith came out.
Yeah.
And that was like a huge record, right?
1988.
1988. I Want Your Sex, right? So everybody had that cassette. And so I had that cassette in the car. And I wasn't in the car, but my brother and my dad were in the car. And my brother was really little, like 10 or something. But he remembers this really clearly. And he said the song Father Figure was on. And that my dad was having like he was like, what do you think your sister, what do you think she thinks this is about? Father Figure. Like he was like reading way too much into it. Right. And then I Want Your Sex came on, I guess, when they were pulling into the driveway of our house. And he took the tape out of the car and came into the house and like slammed it, like ran into my room and like smashed it against the wall into many pieces and banned George Michael from my... it's crazy. Meanwhile, I'm like listening to Sticky Fingers by the Rolling Stones and playing with the dick zipper on the album cover. Anyway... stuff like that.
Was he under the impression that George Michael was straight? Because I remember at that age, for me, I was like, I thought he
must have, and it wasn't even about that. Yeah, everybody, whatever. The word sex, the word father.
It was scandalous.
Figure.
It was scandalous. I Want Your Sex was
super scandalous. Did they play it at your school dance?
I don't know if they did that, but I just remember like it was on MTV, and then remember like George Michael in the video. Yeah. It was like, this is not about casual sex. It's about monogamy. Remember, he had to like put a disclaimer on it.
Remember that like it was yesterday.
So before I let you go, I want to ask you, because it's kind of a unique experience for a literary agent to publish.
Yes.
Yeah, several do, but I mean, it's, you've been on the other side of the line for all these years, and then you talked a little bit about the sales process and the writing process, but the publication process, like when it's really, ramping up, like, has it given you like a new insight into your clients? Like,
hell yeah. I mean, new insight. Like, I've surprised myself that I have no interest in looking at Goodreads, Amazon, any of that, or my numbers.
Right.
None of my business. I was surprised how scary that feels. You know, like when you do dip in the beginning, as we all do, to see how many giveaways are going on.
Right.
And those early reviews, it's just like, woo, painful. Like, no matter what they think. Or it's not, but it's just like, wow, they didn't get it. I wish I could talk, but then, meh. Or worse, it's just like the resounding apathy of like, you have a couple of dozen, you know, so your book is going to be this. It's not going to be that. The chances of your book like earning out its advance or becoming a bona fide success for the publisher so that they like remember you or even know that you're on the list.
Right.
There's nothing like that.
But the thing is, you come into it with a realist perspective because...
Yeah, I really try and advise all the writers to like protect themselves first and don't put any pressure on yourself, for the New York Times. Every writer I know is obsessed with getting into the New York Times, like book review in particular. Guys, doesn't matter at all except for your ego because it just doesn't sell books. As an agent, I have seen some of the best reviewed novels in particular in the history of the world just sell like 1,000 copies. And they were on the cover of the Times Book Review, glowing.
What does sell books? Just word of mouth?
NPR. Like national NPR. Definitely moves the needle. Word of mouth, of course. Reese Witherspoon at the moment. Oprah still. Full court press, 7-figure advance. Sometimes will be a kind of guarantee, but not always. It means you'll get as much as they can give in terms of assistance.
Right.
But it's still a mystery.
It's still a gamble on their part,
right?
too.
It's a huge gamble.
So for people out there listening who are working on a book or who want an agent, you said now that memoir is it's not what it used to be. Now it's like celebrity memoir.
Yeah.
Like you can't write to the market. It's always shifting.
It's always shifting. Publishers are always surprised. The books like Hillbilly Elegy, which is terrible. Not that I read it, but like, you know, that wasn't a priority book for them. They didn't know that was who could have predicted that?
Right.
And so I mean, I would be shocked if they gave that person a big advance. I don't think that
nobody can predict.
You just have no idea. And the market was really different when I signed this book up, and you could kind of be, you know, you could kind of have like 1,000 friends and that was enough, you know?
Yeah.
And now it's all about influencers and Instagram. And if I have to hear the word influencer again, I'm going to die because I think they mean like Kylie Jenner, and those people don't buy books, you know, like the Bookstagram, like whatever.
Yeah. It's an impossible, it's impossible to make it definitive. Like nobody really quite knows in the end why certain books take off. It's like,
right. Like look at the Sally Rooney phenomenon. Like
that book is,
she's Irish.
How much is it sold? How much is it sold?
I don't know. A lot of copies. But that's interesting to me because not just because of her age, but because she's not American. And usually you must be American. Not usually, but for this kind of buzz, it's great. And I think surprising. Like there's just no way that you can count on that.
So just write what you want to write to the best of your ability.
I really tried to write outside my box, if you know what I mean. Like we all do. We try to be better. You can't. It's hard to. I mean, you can edit, but you just have to be who you are on the page, and it's worth finishing a project even if it never sells.
Did you have trouble with honesty? Did you have any, did you find yourself holding back?
Oh, yeah.
You did?
I held back a lot of stories and a lot of things that weren't my right to tell, like other people's stories. Yeah, because I didn't want to embarrass most people. I didn't want to embarrass anyone but myself, so I think I was pretty careful about that, or just tried to make certain things more generic. But I held a lot of stuff back, and there were father-daughter stories that I held back because it's too much to hit the reader over the head with more repetition. I did my best in that regard.
But I mean, it's still very candid. You're still not only are you telling a lot of stories that involve family members, but you're also very candid about yourself as a teenager, sexual history, drug use, abuse. You go there. And so I think when people do that, they typically, I don't know, it's like this. I think sometimes people can conceive of people writing these things as a kind of setting the record straight, or vengeance or revenge or something like that. But there's also, I think, more often than not, a certain nurturing environment that a person comes from to feel at liberty to share that much. Do you see what I'm saying? It's maybe it's a little bit of both, but it's like you said earlier, as difficult as your family life could be, you always felt loved. That comes through on the page. Your family is a loving family. Yeah. It's dysfunctional at times. It can be messy. Yeah. But I found myself endeared to each person in the family.
Oh, good. Yeah, my mother was I think you said in a podcast, you called it ours a loveless marriage. And I wanted to set the record straight that she was it wasn't a loveless marriage. There was love. It was just an untenable situation and marriage. And so, that's the conclusion that I've come to.
And you felt at liberty to say, to...
Yeah, and as a rule, the advice that I've always been given by Betsy Lerner, herself an agent and 2-time memoirist, is you just have to tell the truth. When we ask it of our clients, particularly, in nonfiction, where it's you have to have a legal read, you have to get into the nitty gritty about, it can be really a lot. If we're asking our clients to do that on the page, you have to do it too.
Well, you did it.
It's just the only way to go.
Well, it's truly, it's a really good book. I'm really happy for you. And I'm glad to get to see you and to catch you as you're celebrating its publication. And what's next? What are you doing next?
Whew. I know everybody says this, starting a podcast.
Are you?
But yes, because two friends and also writers who care about fathers in their work, Matthew Philp and Elizabeth Thompson, want to start a podcast called Tell Me About Your Father, or Where's Dad, which is this quip that Dr. Drew used to always say to callers on Loveline. Right, yeah. Remember Loveline?
Yeah.
Some girl would call in every show, and he'd be like, "Where's Dad?" That's his answer for everything. And so what I found, working on the book and promoting the book, is that everybody has a father story. They all want to talk about their dads, men, women. And if you are a father, I want to talk to you about your parenting, that kind of stuff. And there's so many people, from people that we know that nobody knows with extraordinary father stories, to Lisa Brennan Jobs or Erin Carr, who also has a book coming out soon, if not already.
You should call it Father Figure.
It might already be taken.
Oh, right.
My dad wrote a porno. is already taken. Have you seen that show? It's now on HBO, but it was a podcast called My Dad Wrote a Porno.
I want to say I read about it, but I haven't seen it. Is it good?
It's like it's UK.
Okay.
But my dad also wrote a porno, so I fucking love that title.
He did?
Well, he wrote a pornographic story. I think I mention it in the book.
But he took a stab at fiction, and you were like,
a short, yeah. He wrote a short story. He told me, and I got a job at the literary agency, and I'd been working there a year, and it was just a few months before he died, and he gave me this short story. He said to see if it was publishable because he was thinking of submitting it to like Playboy or Maxim. It was a straight up penthouse letter, sexual cuck fantasy about my mother. Oh my God.
I like it though, because I remember this part of the book. I like the fact that you were like not afraid to be like, this was a horrendous.
This is really bad, Dad.
But also like kind of sweet that he was like trying to like
impress you and
get into your world.
Because then at that point I was a New Yorker, and I, like everyone, he wanted to publish, and so I was in the had the foot in the door, and he was convinced of his writing, his literary prowess.
So when is the podcast going to launch?
Brad, we're figuring that out now.
Okay.
No, we're this fall.
All right.
How does one even do this? I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, I can consult. I can teach you about the gear and how to. It's not that hard.
Is it so stupid to even try?
No.
I mean, it's not like you. I would have these conversations anyway, so I like
fun.
Talking to people.
It's wonderful, and I think that the key is to just believe in what you're doing. Like, you have to like it first of all, and then if you want to build a following for your show, you have to keep doing it.
Yeah,
like on a consistent schedule.
Right.
Otherwise, because people then become, I always say you gotta feed the stray cats. Otherwise, they're going to go to the next house. And
you just cold call people, or do you reach out, or people just come to you at this point?
At this point, people come to me. Like, I get publicists. Nice. Yeah.
I love that.
Sometimes I'll do out. It just depends. Or if like a person I know will recommend somebody, or some of it's contingent upon who's coming through LA on tour, just because I only like to do them in person.
Who do you really want to talk to next?
Well, there's a million people I have. I can't reveal who's coming up, but I have some interesting guests coming up. Yeah. And big names.
Howard Stern.
But
I really want to read his book, though.
I do too.
Right?
I do too. I love Howard Stern
because it's about the interviews.
I think that's like my favorite thing about him.
Of course,
especially I like later period Howard Stern. I like the satellite years.
Woke Howard.
Woke Howard is good. The earlier juvenile humor stuff is not as interesting, but his interviews. I think his interviews became better as he went to therapy.
Which he talks about a lot.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure that's what's in the book.
Well, just on his publicity tour. And he's clearly, he's the perfect example of somebody who has grown as a person and is better because he spends his life having conversations with people.
Right.
And not judging the content, but pushing. Yeah. Getting to it, getting past that fucking, I'm on a junket tour and I have to, no.
You can't do that.
Bradley Cooper.
Yeah.
Answer a fucking question.
Right.
It's not.
It's so glorious when he pins somebody and he just keeps,
Yeah.
Because as a listener, you're like, okay, he's cutting through the bullshit. And I think it's a great service. And I think it's actually, I don't know if it's always pleasant for the people he's interviewing, but it's just always better to be honest. I don't know. You don't have to divulge every single dark secret of your life in a public forum.
Yeah.
But I do think that hearing people try to be real and have real conversations, for me anyway, is really nourishing and medicinal. It has a medicinal effect. It relaxes me almost.
Yeah.
Because I think there's just so much bullshit.
Yeah,
like
to
in the
cut
culture
through.
and in the way that people often present, especially like in a celebrity context.
Yeah, I think I really think like a conversation can save a life. I mean, just for that day, even.
Yep. Well, and I think, you know, because of the fact that people listen in their cars,
Yeah.
or they listen in earbuds, it's like one of the last bastions, along with like reading a book, for like slow food attention.
Yeah.
And like intimate connectivity between consciousness as plural. You know, you get to read somebody's insides in a book, or you can hear somebody, if they're willing to be candid enough, in a podcast or a podcast conversation, open up. And that can be a lifeline, I think, you know?
Yeah.
So I can't wait to hear it when it comes out. We don't know the
Thanks,
name. We don't know.
Boo-boo.
We don't know the name yet.
Let's say Tell Me About Your Father, because it isn't taken and it's a little more obvious. But I'm sure we'll use like a clip of, where's Dad? Is that fair use? If I can just do a snippet?
Just, I mean, like, I can't imagine they're going to come
so
after
funny.
you for a second.
Okay, good.
Well, great to see you.
Great
Congratulations.
to see you. Thank you.
All right, guys, there is Erin Hosier. Her memoir is called Don't Let Me Down. It is available now from Atria. You can find Erin online at erinhosier.com. She's got a Facebook presence and an Instagram presence. Don't Let Me Down by Erin Hosier. Out there now. Go get your copy immediately. It's a wonderful book. Thank you to Kill Rock Stars and the band Stereo Total, as always, for the theme song music. Thank you to Tiger in My Tank for the interstitial music. If you want to support this program, you can do so at patreon.com/otherpplpod. Throw a few bucks in the hat. If you want to write to me, the address is letters@otherppl.com. Don't forget about the Other People app. It's free. It's the official app of this program. The Other People with Brad Listi app is available wherever you get your apps. It's free. Go get it. Next week on the program, the return of Steve Almond.